No, this isn't some elf sequel they made without Will Ferrell. No, it's a creature feature Christmas horror movie.
I had a rough day at work. Santa got murdered.
Their mission, to mate with a virgin and conquer the world as a pint-sized master race.
I'm saving it for someone special.
Dan Haggerty stars as Mike McGavin, an ex-detective working on hard times.
First you Santa, then you die.
She is the most important person on Earth.
Santa must expose this unholy force before the elves destroy Christmas.
Jesus Christ.
Elves. They're not working for Santa anymore.
Said December this year would be a return to form for Blockbusters, and sure enough it is. We got another silly creature feature in the vein of something like Troll or Pod People, and we also have another silly Christmas horror movie, just like Jack Frost and stuff like that. But this time it's 1989's Elves. Or really it should be Elf, because there's only one in the movie. I'm just saying, this is before Elf with Will Ferrell came out. This was at least a good 10 plus years before that, so they could have gotten away with it. A young woman discovers that she is the focus of an evil Nazi experiment involving selective breeding, summoned elves, and an attempt to create a master race of supermen. She and two of her friends are trapped in a department store with an elf, and only Dan Haggerty, as a renegade loose cannon Santa Claus, can save them. Yes, that is actually the IMDb description, and while most of that does happen in the movie, that made it sound 10 times more exciting. Before we talk about the movie, I want to say that this movie came out at a very specific point in time. This was right after Gremlins, so the creature feature was definitely going through a bit of a resurgence. And like I mentioned, we have Troll, which was kind of riding that line. A lot of Charles Band's early stuff definitely was riding that. But, you know, with Gremlins, you have Critters, which is probably the best of the bunch. Then you got Ghoulies, Munchies, Hobgoblins, you name it. And this movie was no exception. This came out at just the right time. It was 1989. So that was when these movies were still being made. This was still before the Warwick Davis Leprechaun movies came out, which started the whole resurgence of, you know, mythical creatures or fairy tales or, you know, iconic characters done as horror movies. You know, this was before Leprechaun and Rumpelstiltskin and Pinocchio's Revenge, Jack Frost, Uncle Sam Wants You Dead. It was before any of those movies. So it's this weird in-between where it's like, it wasn't made to be super silly, other than, oh, haha, it's a movie about a killer elf running around killing people. But the movie is played relatively straight. Like, Elves is an interesting one because it's not so bad it's good in the same way that something like Troll 2 is, where it's just inept all the way through. Don't get me wrong, it's very poorly made. The production's bad. A lot of the acting, while better than Troll 2, still isn't all that good. This movie is more well known just based on how fucking insane it is. Because it's not just a movie about a killer elf. Because when I first heard that title, I was like, okay, so it's going to be like, kind of like Leprechaun in the beginning of that. But then I figured out this was before that came out as well. But I was expecting something like, oh, these creatures, you know, maybe they start off nice and then somehow they get mutated. There's some kind of curse that turns them evil. Because even down to the poster has this like monster hand coming out of a Christmas present. And the tagline is like, they're not working for Santa anymore. And I was like, oh, okay, it's like, you know, silly, but all right, well, let's see where it goes. None of that. There is like little to no Christmas mythology in this movie. In fact, the lack of Christmas mythology is replaced with basically every other insane, fucked up thing that makes up this movie. To start the movie off, we have a couple of teenage girls going out into the woods, and just for shits and giggles, they dust off some old satanic spell book, and they try to awaken some kind of mythical spirit to stick it to Christmas or something. So they say that Christmas is an over-commercialized media event to them, so they try to awaken some kind of spirit. And one girl even cuts open her own palm, and you know, eventually they're like, oh, it's not working, let's get out of here. But some of her blood leaks on the ground, and then we see a hand rise out of the ground, and that is the elf. We see our main character. It's Christine, something like that. She goes home to a horrible family, and they just make it very clear that this family is the worst. She has a grandfather who is abusive. He hits her twice, and then to show that he has somewhat of a heart, he then tends to the cut that's on her hand. So he's not a monster. He's just a neo-Nazi, which, yeah, spoiler alert, yeah, it turns out he was a member of some Nazi party. She has an evil stepmother. I mean, okay, they say that it actually is her birth mom. She might as well have been a stepmother, because she's basically every evil, bitchy stepmother cliche that you see in movies. And just to ram home that you're supposed to hate this character, she kills the one friend that this girl has, and that's her pet cat. Yeah, this bitch goes out of her way and kills a cat. Fuck that hoe, man. And her little brother is a terror. He's not as bad as her parental units, but her little brother is pretty bad, just simply because of this line.
You pervert! I'm not a pervert. I like seeing naked girls.
I'm your fucking sister.
Yeah, and you've got fucking big tits, and I'm gonna tell everybody I saw 'em.
I'd love to know what the parents of that kid actor were thinking after they read the script. They're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I want my kid saying that. As long as we're getting a paycheck, that's fine. We see that the elf has followed her home, and the elf scares the little brother, and this begins the many times in the movie that they don't call this thing an elf. And that's what kind of made me think, wow, this is like an unofficial entry in the Troll series.
It was a fucking little ninja troll.
What did you see in the window?
A troll, a raccoon, I don't know, a ninja gremlin.
And I guess while we're talking about that, we should talk about the puppet itself. It's fine for the most part. Like, there's a couple shots where you see some dangling legs, or you see like a person in a costume like with legs that walk. But for the most part, you just get the occasional POV shot of, camera running through forest or whatever. Or most of the time, it's from the waist up, and you'll see, like, different shots where it's a hand, like it's either a prop hand or someone wearing a glove grabbing for, like, a knife or a weapon or something. And then when they show this thing just straight on, it looks decent, mainly because the video quality isn't great. The biggest problem is the fact that the face is just static. The face on the elf is just nothing but... That's it. It just has this like one face the whole movie, and that's... If you're wondering where Dan Haggerty comes into this, well, let me tell you. First, you've got the main girl and her terrible family. You got her vapid bimbo friends. I swear to God, those girls were even bigger bimbos than the characters in the movie called Prehistoric Bimbos in Armageddon City. They're just so stereotypical California, chewing gum, twirling hair. Oh my God, no way! They were so stereotypical. It was painful.
Life is long and life is hard, but Kevin's is thick and Dave's is a yard.
Shut up.
Whatever.
Then you get to Dan Haggerty's character, and even though the dialogue that he was given was shit, he was at least trying to act in this thing. Basically, he's a former detective who's, hitting the bottle. He became an alcoholic. Now he takes up a job as a mall Santa because the mall Santa, who just so happens to be at the same mall that the main girl works at, she works at like a restaurant that's in the mall or close to the mall. The previous mall Santa, who was perving on her in one scene.
What?
Santa said oral.
Ends up getting killed by the elf, and the elf kills him by stabbing him in the dick. Then in enter Dan Haggerty's character, former detective turned alcoholic, needs money, so he takes up the job as the mall Santa. And I like how Dan Haggerty, who has a very thick beard, still has to put on a fake Santa beard when he puts on the Santa costume. I'm like, dude, this isn't like Bad Santa where, you know, Billy Bob Thornton didn't really have a beard. It's like, you're Dan Haggerty. You're more beard than man. Takes over the mall Santa gig. And I thought it was funny that when he comes in to get the Santa suit, it's in this like scummy back room. It's so scummy, it's like something out of a 70s crime movie. Even down to the mall Santa, before he gets stabbed in the dick, he's doing like cocaine or something. It was the 80s, what are you gonna do? But he comes in and they actually have like the police outline of the guy on the ground, like when they came to collect the mall Santa's dead body, and I was like, oh, that's a good sign. Yeah, that makes people want to take this mall Santa position.
First you're Santa, and then you die. In my case, they piss on you. I hope this doesn't start to represent a trend.
Basically, he starts to form a friendship with the main girl, and of course, when shit starts to hit the fan and the elf becomes more and more prevalent and starts killing people, more people start to die throughout the course of the movie. He becomes closer to her, and he tries to help her out, and basically they become like a wannabe Starsky and Hutch, essentially, because then they're like, we'll get down to the bottom of this, and you have an obligatory scene where he goes to learn about elves by reading a book that he finds at a library, and they go to some expert guy, like just professor scientist type dude, who rattles on about elves and how this connects to the Nazi party. And curious where this is going. Simply put, the grandpa was once a Nazi, and you have this like Nazi group that he hangs out with, and they come looking for the main girl because she's connected to some kind of plot that they have, and that's what the professor scientist guy rattles on about. Because according to Professor Scientist's explanation, this is actually what they say in the movie. Apparently, these Nazis created the elf so that it could breed with some pure-blood Aryan virgin, and then that would create some kind of master race.
Each elf was to house the haploid gene structure in its sperm cells to produce the master race. Once again, magical powers can't be hurt or killed. Driven to select the genetically perfect human mate, the proverbial virgin, of course, holy midnight consummation on Christmas Eve.
Yes, it is insanely fucking stupid. Want to know how it gets even more stupid? Well, it turns out that her grandfather is also her father. Yes, they even throw in incest into the movie.
You want to talk to Dad? Go down to the study and talk to him.
When are you saying Dad's dead?
Dad is in the study.
Grandfather is in the study.
Your father isn't dead. The man in the study is your grandfather. And your father!
Oh my god. What the fuck? So yeah, you have these Nazis going after the main girl, and you know, they at one point chase after Dan Haggerty, and there's like a car chase scene, there's a car explosion, they have a fight, and of course Dan Haggerty has to try and get to the main girl and her little brother before they do. All the while they're trying to stop this elf. Well, that's the other thing. Despite the fact this movie is advertised as being about a killer Christmas elf, The elf essentially kills not that many people. In fact, this Nazi party or whatever, they kill more people in the movie than the elf does. Because at one point, the girls try sneaking into the mall after hours so that they can screw around with some guys. And who... Not only are the girls stereotypical Valley girls, but the guys are just stereotypical 80s meatheads. Like,
I got a tire iron in the car. Use the right tool for the right job. My tool's already due. Oh, man.
I was like, okay, here we go. Typical horror movie setup. Dumb, horny teenagers get killed by the murderer. No, they go. They leave. Then the girls, one of them gets killed, not by the elf, but by the Nazis. And it's like... This movie was called Elves. Could we not keep it simple and just make it about a fucking elf going around in a shopping mall? It kills the mall Santa, and then it kills some stupid, horny main character teenagers. So near the end of the movie, it's all shit starts to hit the fan. The bitchy stepmother, after she freaks out and reveals that, you know, our main character was the product of incest, she dies because the elf pushes like a toaster or some kind of electronic into the bathtub with her, and she dies. So Dan Haggerty tries to make his way over there after this like big extended car chase sequence, while the main girl and her little brother go to confront their grandpa, and their grandpa finally spills the beans on why he did it. And he says it was because he wanted to create some pure blonde Aryan virgin that the elf would have sex with and create the master race.
I will pay the price for what I have done.
Well, what in the hell have you done?
I impregnated my own daughter to produce an offspring that would be suitable to the elf.
And then his Nazi buddies show up and they kill him because it's like, oh no, we are going to go forward with our plans. And basically it comes down to like one final Nazi guy who tries to force himself onto the girl as they run through the forest, but he gets killed by the elf. And then the elf tries to force himself onto her. After eating a bug, which I couldn't help but laugh at that. I was like, did they really just do that? I don't even know how to describe how they defeat the thing. It's like there's some kind of power surge thing that blows up and that apparently kills the elf. It's the entire time they were running through the forest, I was just thinking, oh my god, it's like Pod People. I was just like, even the whole like, you know, final shot being this big zoom out shot where it's like sunrise. I was like, holy shit, it's just like Pod People. All it's missing is Trumpy in the distance walking into the sunrise. Oh, and then they try to throw a curveball because then you hear it, basically during the end credits you see like a fetus growing. So that's to, I guess, imply that the elf successfully impregnated her. I don't fucking know. This movie sucked. Even if you're a fan of silly horror Christmas movies, this movie is not good. The acting, while slightly better than a typical bad, low-budget creature feature, even from people who are actually decent actors like Dan Haggerty, the acting, not the worst I've ever seen, but it still is pretty bad, especially from the fucking Valley Girls and the over-the-top Nazis. Elf effects, while I do appreciate a good practical effect here and there, the fucking stupid face of on the elf, that just kept making me laugh every time they showed it. I'm like, that's not scary. It's silly looking. And that's the problem with this movie, is that they treat it way too seriously. Like, yeah, you have a bunch of stupid, crazy, balls-to-the-wall concepts, but none of them clash. It's like, if it was just something as basic as, you know, oh, the elves that work for Santa got poisoned, or something like or like a Leprechaun thing. It's like, you know, oh, you think elves are all cute and you know, friendly, but then you actually get to see one and it's evil and diabolical and it decides it's going to go on a murder spree. If it was something stupid but simple, I would have been down with it. But I will say, if you're a fan of bad movies, then yeah, by all means, watch it. I mean, it is so insane that it is kind of worth watching just for the what the fuck factor. But otherwise, yeah, I don't recommend this movie. And even something as insane as Jack Frost 2, as stupid as that was, at least it knew it was stupid. This is like the other extreme where it's like, you know, they try to treat this stupid shit seriously, and it's like part of you wants to laugh because it's like, oh my god, this is so silly, and they're treating it so seriously. But after a while, especially when it gets to the really uncomfortable territory like cat murder and incest and Nazis, when it gets to all that shit, you're like, okay, now this just isn't funny. This is just getting weird. The only way that they could have successfully paid off the Nazi stuff that's in this movie is if they had Jake and Elwood show up. Next time, we're going to be talking about an animated knockoff, similarly to another Blockbusters video topic, when we talked about A Fairy Tale Christmas, the movie that was sold as Braver years later to try and capitalize on Disney Pixar's Brave. we're going to talk about a movie similar to that. An animated movie that came out straight to video, and then it was bought out by some other company, and then they retitled it to try and bank off of a Disney movie. In this case, it's a film called The Legend of Cirilla, or as it was also sold as, Frozen Land. But that's for next time. Until then, guys, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
What are you, a goddamn Nazi or something? Is that elf yours?